Well, happy spring, and so here is that promised video on. So these are the two nukes that we've been following, two colonies we've been following through a season. Actually, this is going into their second season. This was our original nuke, an original queen. We split them. This was the new split. So this is the oldest queen, this is the newest queen. I haven't been into these hives. I've cracked them just to take a peek, but I haven't been into them since last fall, which kind of just reiterates too how if you hit bee management, there's certain key times of the year that you need to hit them, and the key thing is obviously nutrition and mites. Nutrition and mites, those are your two most important things. And obviously nutrition doesn't mean a hill of beans if you have mites, because the mites are going to kill your bees and they're not going to need nutrition. So mites, followed closely by nutrition. But okay, so let's start here with let's start with the oldest hive here. See, so right away, that's looking like a pretty decent cluster of bees. Because we have some mild weather, we've got a maple flow going on. First thing I'm going to do is take this top one off, take a look. Now, I mean, from what I'm seeing already, I mean, this bottom box is empty, so the chances of them being strong enough to swarm is very minimal. But, yeah, I'm going to take a look at the bottom here anyways. No swarm cells, so I'm going to put this back down here, because what I'm wanting to do is, because this is the oldest queen, I'm wanting to requeen this colony. I know that one's going to need to be split, so because I'm looking for the queen, I don't want her to run down into the second one. There's really no bees of significance present there, so I'm quite confident that she's in this one. I already have a bred queen with me. I'm just looking for eggs. Interestingly enough, when you're first learning to identify queens, it's almost easier to see them out of the your peripheral vision. Just kind of scanning. I just scan the frame in a zigzag fashion, and even then it's not necessarily a guarantee that you'll find her, especially when you're dealing with darker colored queens. They can be tricky to find. But another trick is wherever you have, like, see here, you have cap brood, and then you have brood that's hatched out where there's freshly laid eggs and larvae. Queens are really drawn to the pheromones released by eggs that have just, or rather brood that's just hatched. And so keep close attention to frames like that. Also too, remember, key point, when you're lifting frames out, notice I've removed one so that I have room to pull the frames out.
And the reason you do the outside frame is because it's the least likely place that she's going to be, so
that's
the
right.
least likely chance of squashing.
I mean, she still could be, and so you still, it's funny because when we were doing splits last week, I pulled the 10th frame and she was on it. And so there's always that possibility, but that's also why, whether it's your first frame you're pulling out or your middle frames, you want to make sure that you're pulling them out straight up and down so that you don't roll bees. A lot of people have a tendency when they're pulling the frames to pull it towards them, and they'll roll a bunch of bees. Also too, for those of you who may be curious of why I'm wearing blue gloves, it's actually just
he's a big fan of the Blue Man Group.
There she is. She is right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take her, and by the way, what I was finishing to say is the reason I wear these nitrile gloves is that they're just easier. I just find them easier to, you have your dexterity, so they're not bulky gloves, but you also keep from getting propolis and everything else on your hands. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these down to just a single colony for right now. Also too, if you're wondering, with a queen, this is always a scary thing when you're first learning to handle them. But if you'll see, what I actually am doing is grabbing her two wings. Michael Palmer has a video out, and he says queens have handles, and that's the whole point. You just want to be very gentle. You want to minimize. Now obviously this, unfortunately for this queen, we're going to kill her and replace her, but in general you want to handle her as much as possible by the thorax, not by the abdomen, because obviously the abdomen is where she has her reproductive, her ovaries and what have you, and you don't want that damage. For those of you wanting to mark a queen, you can grab her on your finger like that by the sides and dip your little piece of acrylic paint, or if you have a marker or whatever else. But okay, so
what's this year's color?
This year's color is white, and I have to look that up every year. But so here we have, this is our new queen, mated, has the candy plug. Unfortunately for this one, we're going to make it really quick for her. We just crush her thorax. Now, one thing that you can do, and there's some people who claim that this is the way to go, is you can take the dead queen and rub her so she has her scent on this queen box. I mean, you can do that, but I mean, whatever the case, I mean, here we'll do a little bit of it. But whatever the case, so now old queen is dead. We have our new queen. We're going to put this colony back together. Well, almost back together. When installing a queen cage, always make sure that the bees have access to this screen for feeding her. And so you can either put it this way, you can put it this way, but one way you definitely don't want to do it is you don't want the candy plug facing up, because as it gets warm, the candy can sometimes melt down on the queen and kill her. My preferred way is just to do it sideways. Obviously the screen is facing down so they have access to her. And so I just place her like this. They're already running over to her because they know that's not the right queen. But we've got that candy plug in there. I just pinch the frames together. We're going to feed them as well. When you feed bees that you're requeening, it helps in the probability of proper queen acceptance.
So they don't have any additional stressors.
Yep. And the other thing too here, if you want to just come over here real quick, you're going to have a bunch of crap and everything else down here in the on the bottom board. I just like to clean that up. It's actually pretty amazing how putrid it can smell. And obviously for the bees' sake, it's just not a healthy situation. So clean that up real quick. Put this back. And we'll, like I said, we're going to come back and fill that with some feed. But for right now, we'll just keep going. So that's how you requeen a hive.
So you don't necessarily have to allow 24 to 36 hours of them being queenless before you requeen?
No, you don't. Because what happens is that if you allow them to be queenless for more than a few hours, a lot of times they'll already start to build emergency cells. And as soon as they've started doing that, they will reject any kind of queen that you try to introduce. So it's really important. That's what that candy plug is there for. Another thing you can do is actually put a piece of tape over that candy plug to even give yourself more time. Because usually it takes about 24 hours to 2 days for them to eat that candy plug out and release her. So that's another option. One other quick addendum, which is really important when you're introducing caged queens to a colony, is if there's any attendant bees that have been put in with the queen, you want to remove those before trying to introduce that caged queen to the new colony. And there was an excellent video that I want to say was done by Michael Palmer. If you haven't come across his series, YouTube him. He has a lecture called The Sustainable Apiary. Excellent stuff, excellent material. He really knows his stuff. I believe he had a video on a simple way of getting attendants out of there, and if I can find that, I'll add the link to the description. But yeah, make sure, obviously we got a bunch of queens in at the same time, so the attendant bees are on the outside of the caged queens. So anyways, good luck. Hope this was helpful to you.